1, 2, 3, 4.
If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Just be really loud. Hey, good morning. So, we recorded yesterday, and I didn't record because I'm not a sound technician. And when I plugged my headphones in, it stopped recording, and I didn't check it. So, take number 2.
We're down round 2 on this this particular episode, you guys. You all.
I'm excited to hear it again.
Because we recorded yesterday, I was just asking Teresa how she slept because there's probably not much else because we just talked yesterday.
Yeah. We literally talked for 3 hours yesterday. And neither one of us are doing enough stuff in our lives that makes good stories to have new stories. Although I will say that, I couldn't fall asleep. And I ended up watching Hassan Minhaj, his deep cuts from Patriot Act until...
He's so good.
He's so good. Until 1:30 in the morning, which is great. And found... So we had mentioned yesterday an article that I recommended, and I looked it up and found out what magazine it's from. So we'll talk about that a little later.
Just before we get too far into this, I am Claire Patton.
Oh, and I'm Teresa Sparks.
This is It Chooses You.
Yeah, it's a podcast about things we love and what we love. Shit, what did I say yesterday? It was so good.
I don't know.
I didn't even, and it didn't record.
And you know what? We'll never know.
We'll never know. It was like, it's a podcast where we talk about the things we love and how fucked up we are about them, or something like that. Something.
Just, you know what, everyone, just insert something really imaginative and clever here.
Yeah.
Just, we're going to have you do that work for us.
Yeah, we need you for that, because obviously it's not happening here. The other thing is I had to take one of my midterms yesterday, and I thought I was going to take both of them, but then I decided against it. But I studied, and I got a 98. Woo! So
wonderful.
I'm very happy about that.
You're climbing up, because the one you told me about yesterday was like 88.
Yeah, that's the one I got an 88 on is my hardest class. And
that's not bad then.
Yeah, it's really challenging. And I basically studied for that one for almost 10 days. And still got an 88. So, yeah.
That's 8.8 points per day.
That's right. It's not great. It's not great, but it's better than my other friend Claire. So I have you, friend Claire, and I talk about my other friend Claire a lot because it turns out the people I talk to most in the world are both named Claire, which is clearly I just need clarity, right? I need vision. That's very important.
Well, we'll have to do an episode about Claire.
Sure.
About why you love Claire's.
Yeah, we'll have her on. We'll have her on to talk about the kind of yoga she teaches.
For a long time, my best friend was named Claire. And we went to school together, so it was incredibly confusing.
Maybe Claires are just really good friends. Maybe that's your thing.
Probably. So you were talking to your friend, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was, when I talk to her, I'm always like, oh my God, this classwork. And her dad is from China, and, and she lives in Sydney. So I'm in school for traditional Chinese medicine, and so she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating!" Blah, 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 blah. And she's always, when I get stressed out about it, because my mental illness is that perfection is the goal and excellence will be tolerated. She's like, "Yeah, you only need to pass. you really only need to pass. P's for degrees, man." And I'm like, "Okay, yes, that's right. I only need to pass." So it's very helpful. You both actually do that for me. You guys are both like, just chill. What's wrong with you? But you say it in a nice way. You don't say what's wrong with you. You're like, it's okay. I'm like, okay, no, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, okay.
I do feel like my superpower is just telling people everything's going to be all right. And for some reason they believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you always say it with such joy. And it is. It's comforting. You are comforting. You're like, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, yes, it is going to be okay. That's your... You hypnotize. You hypnotize with kindness. You make my eyes turn into spirals, and then I'm like, and hearts come out of my ears, and everything's okay. Yeah.
Cartoon Teresa is the best Teresa.
Yeah.
I do have one thing. I have one ridiculous thing, and its name is Floor is Lava and it's a new, I guess, game show
Oh.
on Netflix.
Is it exactly what it sounds like?
Yes.
They just turned that childhood game into a game show.
Yeah, which
right.
is pretty fucking brilliant.
It's great.
And I feel like I finally found my spectator sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they have different rooms. It's the bedroom or the living room or the I don't know. There's one that's like a space theme, and so they just have various chairs and rocks, and in one case there's a pyramid and sort of secret things they can pull to help them get across the lava. But the lava also kind of explodes a little bit.
Sure.
Very dramatic music. It's ridiculous, and it is so much fun.
That's great.
Lots of face plants.
Oh,
I
sure.
mean, lots of really good.
I mean, but are they keeping the childhood obstacles intact? Like, my thing was like, nightstands are not stable enough for you to stand up. Like, you don't
Right.
have the balance, and they're not stable. Also, if you knock that lamp over again, your mother will kill you. Like, do they include that level of jeopardy in it?
There's a little bit of that. Like, actually, a lot of the objects do move. So sometimes there will be an object and the people are approaching it and going like, wait, does this move? When I jump on this, is it going to move? And the answer is usually yes. And there are plates and things like that, but you can just kick them out of the way. And then there are objects that are useful.
But are you penalized for the destruction, I guess, is my question.
No, you're not.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple, it's teams of 3.
Oh, teams even. Okay.
Yes, teams of 3, and you have to get through the room. Each person that successfully gets to the exit is a point.
Okay.
If there's any kind of tie in terms of points, then time matters.
Okay.
So, and in every room, the exit stairs are slowly sinking into the lava.
Yeah. That's awesome. This sounds amazing. I want to watch it. Yeah.
But what's kind of amazing about it is that, strangely enough, the group dynamics are sort of hinted at in the team's intro, and then always come out in the actual playing of the game, because everyone's doing the course at the same time. The team is doing the course at the same time, and then the teams go separately. But there was one group of 3 teachers, and it was 2 kind of goofball men and a woman, and the men were like, I need someone to hold my hand. And so the woman was like, okay, I'll just jump over these 3 obstacles 4, 5, 6 feet between and come and hold your hand. And I was watching it, and I said to my cousin, they're going to get through and she's going to fall because she's been helping these dudes the entire time. Sure enough, fucking the 2 dudes get through, she falls. And I'm like, she was ahead of them and she would have won if she didn't go back to help these dudes.
Why have we been enculturated to help all the time? Oh,
I was like, I am watching the manifestation of gender dynamics occur right now on this stupid game show.
That's awesome. Well, do they choose the teams? Like, I never watch things where the point is to be mean to each other. Like, I never watch Survivor or any of that nonsense.
Yeah,
I know.
no,
like,
not at all.
I'm not into that at all. So do they choose the teams? Like, sometimes some shows will cast teams that actually don't like each other or like have some of that weird tension.
No.
Oh, okay,
no,
okay.
No, it's tension.
I want it to be good-hearted.
Yeah, it's totally good-hearted, and there's no tension intended, but it just like accidentally comes out.
Oh, sure,
you know?
yeah. Okay.
And then the host is just doing voiceover during the actual course. The host is like, I don't know, whatever. He's whatever.
White? Is he a white dude?
Yeah, he is. Named like Remington or something.
Absolutely, Remington is definitely his name. Yep.
But
Cody.
He like, he does voiceover during the course, and he's slightly snarky, just a little bit. Like, someone will go, Carrie, don't fall in the lava. And he'll be like, some very specific and helpful advice from John. You know, like, just a little snarky, which is kind of fun too. And they anytime there's a face plant onto an object, it's like replayed 8 times. It's amazing. It's so great. It's so great. Anyway, you guys, if you're bored, if you like sports,
if you're one of the people who is maintaining quarantine or safer at home because you care about yourself and others,
check out Floor is Lava on Netflix. And it's not The Floor is Lava, it's Floor is Lava.
All right. Thank you for that game show recommendation.
So, I'm trying to think of a segue from Flora's Lava into
Yeah.
the story I'm going to do today.
There's no segue, but having heard it, I thought of something, and I was like, oh yeah, like we are approaching this with like good spirits and love for each other, and we like talking to each other, and we make each other laugh. And if we're telling stories that have really dark elements, maybe like let's bring that down,
Yeah.
like sink into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I laugh when I'm uncomfortable. Telling stories like the ones that I think we're probably going to be telling a little more often, it's uncomfortable, and I don't want to laugh.
Right.
You know? Like, and I'll manage my own stuff, but like, just take a moment and like sink in to whatever the story is.
So, Teresa, today I'm going to tell you the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, civil rights and agricultural activist from Mississippi.
Okay. I like both of those things, civil rights and agriculture. So,
just a note on my sources here. There's a fantastic short documentary on pbs.org called Stand Up about Fannie Lou Hamer. There is also a great PBS article. It's just called Fannie Lou Hamer, but it's from their Women in American History series. There's also a great article from lifeandtime.com, and it's THYME, like the herb, Fannie Lou Hamer and Farming as Activism, A Pig and a Garden. This article is by Dr. Monica M. White. It's actually an excerpt from her book called Freedom Farmers.
okay.
And then good old Wikipedia,
Yeah.
which I weirdly looked at last. I'm kind of glad I did, because Wikipedia can be so thorough that I just think there would have been a tendency to write it in that order and that tone instead of my own thing.
Yeah,
you know?
there's no story in Wikipedia. It is an encyclopedia. It's like there's no shape. It's just like, here are some dates and here are some things that happened, which is super useful. But
I will say the Wikipedia article on her had a lot of information that I did not find elsewhere. So that's pretty cool. Fannie Lou Hamer was born on a plantation in 1917 in Mississippi, just east of the Mississippi Delta. She was the 20th born child of sharecroppers.
okay.
So I can tell you a little bit about sharecropping if you want.
Yeah. So plantation and 1917, those two things raise a question mark in my head.
Right.
So I think that's probably my ignorance of history. But I think of plantations as going away after the Civil War. And clearly that's not true. So, okay.
So sharecropping was an arrangement in which black farmers would work for white plantation owners and farm for them, and also be either paid or given land, supposedly. So sharecropping was a way that white plantation owners would basically quote unquote hire black farmers to work their land. But what ended up happening was that the black farmers would just be constantly in debt and unable to work their way out of that debt to the white plantation owners.
Yeah.
So
I've heard sharecropping called debt peonage.
Yeah,
It's essentially
exactly.
like, we're going to split the profits with you, and the split is determined by us, and we can change the split at any. There's no actual agreement. There's no actual contract. It's basically just the new form of that slavery took. It's just
I mean, it wasn't
different
uncommon.
It
It wasn't uncommon for black farmers to be indebted for 97 years to a white plantation owner. In fact, Dr. Leslie Burl McLemore calls sharecropping neo-slavery.
Oh yeah, okay.
So, it was supposed to be better. They were supposed to be free, but I think in all essence, it was just another form of slavery. So the black farmers' lives were completely controlled by the white plantation owners. Sharecroppers, as I said, were beholden to the plantation owners for life, and often were given no access to grow their own food. They were not even allowed to leave the property or do anything without the owner's permission. It wasn't uncommon for their crops to be burned, poisoned, or their vehicles destroyed in order to keep them on the plantation and under the thumb of the white plantation owners. So this was the climate and fucked up historical context in which Fannie Lou Hamer came into this world.
Okay. White people are something, aren't we? Like, we're pretty, like, we have a lot to answer for. We have a lot to answer for. Okay.
Yes. So, as I said, she was the 20th born child of sharecroppers. She started picking cotton at the age of 6.
Oh, God. Okay.
Although it was uncommon at the time, she did actually manage to attend school during the winter when the growing season wasn't on. There was a one-room schoolhouse for children of sharecroppers. Such a progressive community there. So she actually did manage to go to school, and she really enjoyed it, but she did have to leave at age 12 to basically help her parents with the sharecropping. They were aging, and they needed more help.
I'm sorry, did you say she was the last of 20 children or just one of 20 children?
She was the 20th born child. I don't know if they had any more children after her.
Okay.
So because Fannie Lou was literate, she eventually was made the plantation time and record keeper. This was a less physically demanding job, and in general, it was held in higher regard. I don't know if that is among the sharecroppers themselves, or if the time and record keepers were treated better by the plantation owners. I'm not sure what the ramifications of that are.
I just let me just stop. Like, I'm just imagining a 6-year-old picking cotton. Like, I know 6-year-olds who can't tie their fucking shoes yet, right? And she has to work. I mean, she has to do very difficult agricultural labor in the full sun, all day. And I've seen documentaries on it, like cotton, the bowl that the cotton comes out of will slice the hell out of your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Will just
it's very sharp.
Yeah, really painful. So a 6-year-old doing that. Okay.
And then in 1945, Fannie Lou married Perry Pap Hamer, who drove a tractor on the plantation where she worked. That plantation was owned by W.D. Marlowe.
Okay.
It was the plantation she grew up on. So Pap and Fannie Lou wanted to have children, but in 1961, Fannie Lou was forced sterilized without her consent when she went to the hospital to have a uterine tumor removed.
So they were married 15 years, and they're like, we want to have children. We're not having children. Presumably she had some kind of exam, and they're like, oh, we think there's a tumor on your uterus that's preventing you from having kids. Come on in, have it removed. And then they just removed her uterus entirely.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this was pretty common practice at the time, to force sterilize Black Americans. And it was so common that Fannie Lou and her friends called it the Mississippi appendectomy.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Pap and Fannie Lou ended up adopting 2 daughters who they raised, but one of them died from internal hemorrhaging at a young age. She was actually denied admission to the hospital at the time on account of her mother's activism.
Right. So if you are an activist and you want to change the conditions that you find yourself in, change unjust conditions that you find yourself in, we'll kill your children as a punishment for that. Okay. Or not actively kill them in this case. Just let them die. We'll let your children die. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I'm experiencing waves of shame. I'm sorry. I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry to not feel the waves of shame.
Fannie's life changed in August of 1962 when her best friend Mary Tucker asked her if she wanted to attend a meeting that was organized by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC for short, SNCC, but they call it SNCC. The really interesting thing, more additional context on that meeting, is that Fannie Lou later said that for the first time in her life at that meeting, she was told that it was her right to vote, and that if African Americans voted, then they had a say who was in office. So, like, up until that point, she actually had never even heard that it was possible for Black people to register to vote. She didn't even know that that was a possibility.
And this is 1962.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a year after she's forced sterilized.
Yeah.
By the way. So she goes to this meeting and suddenly her eyes are open and there's some possibility for her. So a few days later, Fannie boarded a school bus filled with African Americans who were determined to register to vote. Charles Cobb, a civil rights activist, says that this was viewed as, quote, a hostile act directed at white supremacy, end quote. Which I thought was interesting because it just sounds really familiar, right? Like protesting, standing up, speaking truth is all hostile acts.
Yeah,
right?
but like they're not protesting though. They're boarding a school bus.
Oh no, yeah,
to go fill out some paperwork That's what's called hostile. Yeah,
Paperwork is hostile.
that's right. I mean, it certainly can be. But yeah, I mean, that's, characterizing it as hostile. And, I think correct to say that it's directed at white supremacy. Like, wouldn't, if I was in that situation, I would also direct some activity against the oppressive system I was in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, oh God, okay.
Understandably, on the school bus, tensions were pretty high. The black voters were incredibly nervous, and white people were driving by the bus, waving guns and hurling insults and obscenities at them. So Fannie saw this, and in an effort to diffuse the situation and ease the tensions of the people in the bus, she started singing "This Little Light of Mine." And this effectively kind of soothed everyone's nerves for the moment and alleviated their fear a bit.
Yeah.
One thing I really love about Fannie Lou is that she really saw a need and then filled that need throughout her life. I feel like that's a theme that I'm projecting onto her story. So at the registrar's office, Fannie Lou was one of only 2 black citizens who were even allowed to take the literacy test required to register to vote.
Why wasn't everyone allowed to take it? Do we know? I mean, first of all, requiring a literacy test to be able to vote. Like, okay, great. So we don't provide schools, but you have to know how to read.
Right.
Okay, so that's one obstacle. But why were only 2 people allowed to even take it? Do we know? Or like, we can only... I'm so sorry, we're so tired, we can only offer 2 tests a day. Well, yeah, sure. Okay.
The thing about the literacy test is she was asked to define de facto laws.
That's not literacy, that's law. Is this a test to get into law school?
Yeah, and I'm like a white person in 2020 who went to college, and I don't know what a de facto law is.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a master's degree. I have no idea.
Yeah. So what the fuck? So she was allowed to take the test, but she failed it. And eventually, in retaliation, the white supremacist government leaders there ended up actually just shutting down the circuit clerk's office where they were trying to register to vote.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. And also now they're just removing polling places so that, or if you go to a polling place, you have to have arrived there in your own vehicle. You're not allowed to be driven there by someone else. Yeah. That's what's happening now. Okay.
So the black voters boarded that bus and headed back home, and that school bus was actually stopped by the whole highway patrol because according to them, the bus was too yellow.
I mean, it has all of the elements of a comedy in how ridiculous the responses are and the language is, right? It has all of those comedic elements, except that it's directed at absolutely horrible, maintaining a horrible system. Yeah. So it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Oh, no, you're not kidding me. You're serious with this.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it sounds like a joke.
It does. It does. Okay, Mississippi.
To top it all off, the registrar actually ended up calling W.D. Marlowe, the plantation owner where Fannie Lou lived and worked, and basically told Marlowe that Fannie Lou had attempted to register to vote. So Marlowe confronted Fannie Lou and told her that she needed to withdraw her application to register, or she would have to leave the plantation. Fannie Lou firmly refused him, saying, quote, "I didn't go down there to register for you. I went down there to register for myself," end quote.
Oh my God. Like the idea that a political official could call if the voter registration clerk in Boulder County, like, didn't want me to vote and then called my landlord to tell me that I had tried and that, maybe he should do, like, what? Yeah. Okay. It's just yeah.
Or called your boss.
Right.
And,
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
To say the least. So Fannie Lou left the plantation at that point. Her husband actually had to end up working through the rest of the season, but the family left. And Fannie Lou later said, quote, "They kicked me off the plantation. They set me free. It's the best thing that could happen. Now I can work for my people," end quote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Because they're not allowed to leave. Like, they had to get permission to leave the property. And so, but now she's been kicked off. so she doesn't need that permission anymore. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So after leaving the plantation, Fannie Lou and her husband went to stay with Fannie Lou's best friend, Mary Tucker. And on September 10th, 1962, Fannie Lou's husband, Pap, had a premonition. And he said he thought the family was in danger. So the couple fled the house with their adopted children and went to Sumner, Mississippi.
I'm sorry, where were they? They fled to Sumner, but I missed where they were.
I think they were in Sunflower County and they went to Tallahatchie County or something like that.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. That same night, white supremacists attacked Mary Tucker's house in a drive-by shooting. They shot into the home 16 times in an attempt to kill Fannie Lou. Looking back, Fannie Lou said, quote, "I guess if I'd had any sense, I'd have been a little scared. But what was the point of being scared? The only thing they could do was kill me, and it kind of seemed like they'd been trying to do that a little bit at a time since I could remember," end quote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would not be that brave. I certainly would not be that brave.
To have your house or your friend's house shot up in an attempt to kill you and then keep working?
Unquestionably, I would stop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I've stopped doing things that were not as important for much worse reasons than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I love that the voices from elsewhere told him, they're like, "Hey, man," and that he listened, and he's like, I heard it, I heard it. It's time to get out of here. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't, it requires so much willpower to listen to those instincts, you know?
Yeah.
So the same year, so that was September, and on December 4th, Fannie Lou went to take the literacy test again, but failed and was rejected. Those damn de facto laws.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she figured that one out, but there's another one, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
like, okay, I've got de facto laws now. Okay, let's do the next one. Yeah.
So after failing the second time, she said to the clerk at the registrar's office, "You'll see me every 30 days till I pass." And on January 10th, 1963, she took the literacy test again and succeeded, winning her right to vote.
God. Okay.
It's one of those weird things. There's like, I want to say yay.
Right.
But
Oh,
it's
yay. Oh, no.
fucking
hold on.
stupid.
Yeah.
That she even... Ugh. So, of course, in the fall, when she actually went to vote, she found out that she actually had to pay 2 poll taxes
Yeah.
and have the receipts in order to actually vote. She had no fucking clue about that, so she didn't have that. This is obviously another white supremacist hurdle in order to repress the black vote. So, of course, eventually she paid those taxes and did win her right to vote. Moved by the stories of Fannie Lou singing on the bus, Bob Moses, the leader of SNCC, asked fellow activist Charles McLaurin, Mac for short, to seek Fannie Lou out and ask her to speak at a SNCC conference in Nashville. Fannie Lou joined SNCC as a speaker and community organizer, fighting to register African Americans to vote. Fannie Lou was an energizing and effective speaker with her powerful voice and ability to clearly speak truth. I think of her, I've seen video footage, and I encourage everyone to look it up, of her speaking, and she kind of reminds me of a mixture of a preacher, a politician, and like your next door neighbor.
Where is that? Is that, so that's a quote. I'm interested in that, because like, oh, she's so articulate is like a classic microaggression, right? And so is
That's not a quote. That's all my opinion.
Oh, okay.
I will follow it up with this quote from African-American civil rights activist Flonzie Brown Wright, who said, "When you looked into Mrs. Hamer's eyes, you knew she meant business, you knew she had been through a lot, and just her very presence commanded respect."
Yeah, that's cool.
End quote. I was not in any way trying to say she's so articulate and be microaggressive at all.
Oh, yeah.
She was a powerful speaker. Yeah, that's all. That's all I was saying. In June of 1963, Fannie Lou was on a bus returning home from a voter registration conference in South Carolina with other activists. And they stopped in Winona, Mississippi at a diner for a pit stop, and they were denied service by a waitress. A highway patrolman arrived on the scene and tried to intimidate them into leaving. someone in the group started taking down the officer's license plate number, and the officers began to arrest the activists. Fannie Lou actually wasn't involved in any of this. She was on the bus at the time, but she ended up getting off and asking the officers if they were allowed to go ahead and continue on their way. So even though she wasn't involved at all, they just went ahead and arrested her with the other members of SNCC that they were angry at, who were just asking for service.
Yeah. Yeah. It's they were, I think a modern parallel is they were arrested for resisting arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
In jail, 3 white men came to Fannie Lou's cell and said to her, "We're going to make you wish you were dead." She was taken to another cell where 2 male black prisoners were being held. The highway patrolman gave the first prisoner a blackjack, and he told that first prisoner to beat her. He did beat her, and he beat her until he was too tired to continue beating her. The patrolman then gave the blackjack to the second prisoner, and as he beat Fannie Lou, she started kicking her feet in pain. So the patrolman ordered the first prisoner to sit on her feet to stop her from kicking. Only then did she start screaming, and the officer began to beat her himself, telling her to hush. According to reports, she was groped by officers during the beating, and her dress was pulled over her head, exposing her. That day, she was beaten and almost killed, suffering injuries, including a blood clot over her left eye and kidney damage that would affect her for the rest of her life. And she was finally released on June 12, 1963.
God. I mean, just imagine how fucked in the head you have to be for this to be a solution. Like, if you're that white guard, what the fuck is your brain that this is the thing that's gonna, like, oh, I'll get her. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Well, and something like making not doing it yourself, only stepping in when somebody might hear that you're doing it, right? Which indicates maybe there's someone in the building who might have had a problem with it, right? Or someone in the building who cared enough about the law to maybe, so only stepping in at that point, but making other people who are also oppressed in the way she's, like, carry out the terror. I mean, it's terrorism. That's terrorism. We're going to hurt you, and we're going to make other people who are in the same conditions that you are in do the actual hurting. Like, it's so fucked up. Okay.
It's another level of exertion of power, right? It's not only could I beat you, but I can force people in your same condition to beat you.
Yeah.
That's evil. Here's what Fannie Lou said later about being almost murdered. Quote, "From the time that I began working, I never had a mind to stop. But after that happened to me in Winona, then I knew that it wouldn't be anything would stop me other than death." End quote. So once again, I mean, according to her, it just solidified her commitment to her activism. And I would never be that fucking brave. Just wouldn't. In 1964, Fannie Lou helped found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, the MFDP. And this party set itself up against the regular white supremacist Democratic Party of Mississippi, which was segregated. They were deterring African Americans from registering to vote, just like the conservatives, right? In 1964, she ran for Congress. Her friend and fellow activist Charles McLaurin, Mac, who I mentioned earlier, tells the story of the day he took Fannie Lou to the Secretary of State's office where she would register to run.
I want to. Sorry to interrupt you, but I smiled in my voice because I just love that I love that she took that step. She's like, oh, okay, well then here's what's next. I love that.
Right.
I love that. Okay, now I've been registered to vote. I've taken care of all of those obstacles, and now here's the next thing. Like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So they go to the Secretary of State's office, and they walk in, and as Mac recounts it, the white woman there, the secretary behind the desk, is like,
the Karen behind the desk.
yeah, the Karen says, "What do you N-words want?" But like in a casual, nice tone.
Sure, just another Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Fannie Lou said, "Well, I'm here to run for Congress." And suddenly, out of nowhere, there's like 12 white people's faces that just pop up and are looking at them. Right. This is. So the secretary says to them, "Okay, you've got to fill out these papers." So they go back to their car and they fill out these papers and they bring them back into the office. And then she says, "Okay, well, now you need a $500 check." So they go back outside and they go to the payphone and they call.
Is that true? Do you have to pay $500 to run for Congress?
I actually don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that just seems like bullshit.
That may be a bullshit thing.
Right.
Totally.
Make it out to Karen K. Karen. And then
Karen Carrington.
And then you can. It's not a coincidence that all three of my names start with K.
Right.
And then you can run for Congress. Oh,
right.
Okay.
So Fannie Lou and Mac go outside and they call the representatives from the MFDP, and the representatives say to them, "Hey, no problem. Just stay where you are. We'll bring the cashier's check down." So they take the check into the office and hand it to the secretary. And then she says, "Great. So this is the last day that you can qualify to run for Congress. It's 4:00 now. This office closes at 4:30. And this paperwork needs to be signed by your campaign manager." Well, Fannie Lou didn't have a campaign manager. So she turns to Mac and she says, "Mac, put your name on those papers and let's go home." And he said to her, "Fannie Lou, I don't know anything about being a campaign manager." And she said, "Mac, you know as much about being a campaign manager as I know about being a candidate." Mm-hmm. And the thing I see in that I project for my own life is this idea that, I found that I always want to feel ready for something. I want to feel prepared. I want to feel like I'm going to succeed. But I look at that and, well, the lesson I've learned through my life is like, you're never ready. You just have to go for it. Mm-hmm. It's like this thing we were talking about last time about acting your way into right thinking instead of thinking your way into right action. Mm-hmm. So the thing that I project from my own life is like, oh, that's amazing. They were just doing it.
Yeah.
They were just taking the next step.
Yeah. Well, in every obstacle, they're like, okay, another obstacle. And it doesn't sound like anyway from this story as we're hearing it and from the sources you consulted, it doesn't sound like there's like hand wringing or like an overly pensive. It's just like, okay, nope. Next hurdle. Okay, next hurdle. Let's keep going. Yeah.
I mean, isn't hand wringing and being overly pensive just another symptom of privilege?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think that's completely fair.
Right?
Who has the luxury for that shit except people who don't actually have to worry about anything? The only people who have time to worry are people who don't actually have anything to worry about. Maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pleat of truth, T.
Pleat of truth. Which is not to say that if you're worried, not to say that problems don't exist, etc. But, put in context where a group of people are experiencing what she is experiencing, trying to just be a citizen, which she already is, right? Like all of the hand-wringing that people in other groups might do, just in a little clearer context. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good point.
It makes my own hand-wringing seem as ridiculous as it actually is.
So Fannie Lou actually ended up running for Congress twice.
Shit, yeah.
She didn't win either election, but obviously acts like these are what began to move the needle in favor of
a black
civil
woman
rights.
running for Congress in Mississippi. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's amazing. I feel like, honestly, I have to, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
But,
go ahead.
I've been thinking, we have to move to Mississippi. That's, yeah, I'm going to, yep. I don't know why. I'm going to go there. I don't know why.
So that was in 1964. And then 4 years later, in August of 1968, she was part of MFDP's delegation to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City. So the MFDP went to the convention in order to ask to be recognized as the only legitimate Democratic Party of Mississippi.
Sure.
Because they were the integrated party.
Wait, so I'm sorry. Yeah. So wait, sorry. What year is this? This is 68?
It's 4 years later. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 68. I am ashamed that I'm not sure about this, but what was the statute or the Supreme Court case that struck down separate but equal? Brown versus Board of Education? When was that?
I think so, but
When
I don't
was
know.
that?
I don't know.
Okay. Because I'm like, if she's saying that, so if she's saying it's the only legitimate party, I'm guessing that was based on the fact that the Supreme Court had decided already in that court case that separate but equal is actually unjust.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I couldn't say for sure. So they basically wanted to be seated as the legitimate Democratic Party of Mississippi because, as I said before, the white supremacist Democratic Party of Mississippi was refusing to register black voters. Mm-hmm. The MFDP wanted the National Party's Credentials Committee to seat them, again, as the only legitimate Democratic Party. Fannie Lou was slated to speak to the Credentials Committee and argue the MFDP's case. There's footage of this, and I highly recommend that you all look it up.
There's footage of her arguing the case.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. It's pretty powerful. Her manner of arguing the case was basically to tell her story, her personal story. Mm-hmm. She told the story of being beaten in jail in Winona. Mm-hmm. And
sexually assaulted, right?
And sexually assaulted. Yep. She actually didn't talk about any of the sexual assault piece of it. I don't know why, but that wasn't in her testimony. But she did speak about being beaten. So at the end of her speech and story, she concluded with the following, quote, "All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hook because our lives be threatened daily? Because we want to live as decent human beings in America," end quote. Now, according to reports, there were several members of the Credentials Committee in tears during her speech. Mm-hmm. And watching that speech, even back then, I don't know how there couldn't be. Mm-hmm. The word on the street was that the MFDP was going to win the seat at the National Democratic Party. However, LBJ and other party leaders were against integration.
Yeah, Southern white Democrats, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they went ahead and pulled some strings, and kept the committee from seating the MFDP. In an attempt to compromise, the MFDP was given 2 seats at the DNC, allowing them official recognition, but not as the only legitimate party.
I don't know what that means. Given 2 seats, how many seats were available?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's like it was a conciliatory compromise.
Sure.
It was a shitty compromise. So this was a pretty big blow to the MFDP, but this changed the face of the Democratic Party in America. The fact that they attempted it. Shortly after the convention, Fannie Lou went to Africa with SNCC, and this trip changed her life. She later said that she had never seen black people running businesses. She hadn't seen any black people working at banks or in political roles at all.
Yeah.
And she was incredibly moved by the experience, later describing it as a revelation.
Yeah, representation matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
See someone do it. Oh, that is possible. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She said this trip to Africa gave her pride in her ancestors. Which is pretty amazing. I don't know what that's like, as you said the other day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad is super into genealogy, and he mostly just names and dates and maybe locations and maybe occupations. He's not into the story of it. Mm-hmm. And I recently called him and I was like, you need to send me what you have, because I'm assuming there is no one worthwhile, like no one who was actually working for social justice in my family tree. But I want to confirm it, and I want to learn as much as I can about what my people have done to reinforce this horrible system, so that I can start to reckon with my debt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He doesn't know that's why I asked for it.
Right. He just thinks you're curious.
Yeah, exactly. He's thrilled that I am interested.
Fannie Lou remained active in politics and with SNCC, but she got a little fed up with the whole system, so she started to seek out ways to support her community from the ground up directly. she saw how many people were suffering from a lack of basic necessities like food or clothing. And her daughter recounts how she'd go on speaking tours up north and tell her audience, like, hey, you know the people down south don't have clothes. So her audiences started mailing her boxes and boxes of clothing, which actually, like, stacked up on her porch. And she would distribute that. She said, well, if we're hungry, let's plant food. So she started growing and canning food and giving it away. She often said that as long as she had a pig in a garden, she knew she'd be able to survive. And so in 1969, she founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative, the FFC, in Sunflower County, Mississippi.
So 1969. This is a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's okay. Yeah, she's not taking some time to consider. She's like, okay, next, let's do it.
She's prolifically active. Yep.
Yeah.
So the plan for the FFC was to grow enough food that people just wouldn't know hunger, according to Fannie Lou. So she started something called the Pig Project with a small donation from the National Council of Negro Women. And the Pig Project was actually Heifer International's first American project.
Oh, right. I didn't know Heifer International had been around for that long, nor was I aware that it was not an American organization. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was news to me, too.
Although the name International should have fucking clued me in to the fact that it's not American. Yeah, okay. The hints were there. Yeah.
I guess so.
Jesus. Get your shit together, Teresa. Come on.
Yeah, I was right there with you. The concept behind the Pig Project is that a family would receive a pig for free, and then they would bring it back to the herd to mate in 2 years, and they would give 2 piglets from each litter back to the pig bank to replenish the stock that would then be given to other families, right? So nature is abundant, as we know, and so it was to kind of harness that power of nature's abundance and just share it.
That's great.
She managed to convince the editor of the Harvard Crimson to write an article about the FFC and to actively solicit donations. And she raised $8,000 and she bought 40 acres. This became Freedom Farm. And she continued to raise money with donations. And by 1973, the FFC had 600 acres in crop production.
Shit, yeah.
And 300 families had benefited from her pig bank.
Yeah. 600 acres is significant.
Yeah.
That is a large amount of land. That's great.
70 families lived in low-income housing that the FFC had established. Fannie Lou had started daycares. She and the FFC established a college scholarship program and started a business incubator where they funded Black-owned businesses and provided job training for African Americans in the area. Also, during this time, Fannie Lou founded the National Women's Political Caucus. Now, the FFC ended up folding after her death, just lack of funding.
When did she die?
She died March 14th, 1977.
Okay. So she was 60.
Yeah. She died from complications related to hypertension and breast cancer.
Okay.
As she was dying, she said to Mac, quote, "Promise me I will not be buried on a plantation. I've been on a plantation all my life, and I don't want to be buried there," end quote. On her gravestone is a famous phrase of hers. "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired."
Oh, that's where that comes from. Okay. I've heard it, of course. That's, okay. She's where that comes from. Okay.
In Rollville, Mississippi, there's a statue to Fannie Lou Hamer and a memorial garden. The post office in Rollville is named after her. There's a Fannie Lou Hamer Library in Jackson, Mississippi. And there's, at the Council of Federated Organizations, or COFO, there's a Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, which provides outreach programs and a research library. Fannie Lou's legacy is responsible for many agricultural activist organizations now, like the Southeast African American Farmers Organic Network, the Southern Black Women's Initiative, the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, and the National Black Food and Justice Alliance.
That's cool.
So without her, none of that would be possible today. And that is the story of Fannie Lou Hamer.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for telling that story. I didn't know anything about her. And I am pleased to know more.
She's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
She's pretty awesome.
Well, I'm thinking about, so they were, I don't know if they were incorporated, the Freedom Farm Cooperative. I don't know if it was, the paperwork associated with it, but if it was surviving on donations and then when she died, like the donations tapered off because they were donations that were sort of attached to her in some way, or she was the one who was generating, like, it really, it makes me think about how to build an organization that is accomplishing those kind of necessary tasks and support in a way that's actually sustainable, meaning it can continue to generate itself and continue to help without necessarily receiving donations. Now, selling something, that kind of thing, may be necessary, right? That exchange is necessary. But yeah, reliance on donations is sort of, it just feels really, really precarious, right? Because it is so often about donating to a person and about how, and not necessarily about donating to an organization that is providing necessary services, right? There has to be some kind of personality involved.
Right.
You know? Yeah. What would it look like to run an organization sustainably that was accomplishing those same goals, working toward those same goals?
Yeah, I'd be really curious if there are some models out there that provide alternatives,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it seems like I've definitely read about some permaculture farms that are sustainable, meaning they have more outputs than they require inputs because nature is abundant. And so, yeah, it seems like permaculture might be it's why you and I both like it. Permaculture might be a way to actually approach that. Food security, security and all of the things that come once you know where your next meal is coming from. I wonder if there's a way to have a sustainable business that is not actually capitalist, right? Because capitalist, like, the profit is siphoned basically off into a person or a corporation or whatever. Like, what does it mean if you don't actually hoard the money? Like, what does it mean to have a business that's selling something, but like then the profit actually is legitimately, everyone who's involved in it receives a solid living wage, they have their needs abundantly met, and then whatever's left is put back in to the business. Like, I'm interested in those models a lot. Yeah. Which is not to say that, a different model isn't possible, but I regret that her, the Freedom Farm Cooperative, I regret that it went under.
But looking at it from a nature perspective, it also spread seeds, right? Because now there are all these other
there we go,
groups that have popped up. Yeah.
I wasn't trying to call you out about the calling her articulate thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that you said that.
Yeah.
It is one of the classic microaggressions.
Totally. And I actually was very aware as I wrote it not to be microaggressive about it.
Yeah. Well, commenting on, oh, she's so articulate. Like, yeah, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it. And maybe I just heard it that way. But that kind of thing is like, well, yes, she speaks English. That's true.
I said she was an energizing and effective speaker.
Okay.
And she had a powerful voice, and I said it better yesterday because I just, this just felt very book reporty to me. And I said yesterday, I just said it off the cuff and it worked better. But I said she clearly spoke the truth. Like, there's just a clarity to the way she just cuts through everything, and she's just like, meh. And then I said she reminds me of a mix of a preacher, a politician, and your next door neighbor. So I don't know. I was thoughtful. That doesn't mean it wasn't flawed, but I was thoughtful about the way I talked about her.
And I'm clearly like hype. The few things I do know, I'm like hyped to hear them. I'm completely keyed on it. I'm like, I know that one. I know that one. Did I hear that one? Yeah. Okay.
I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, if all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And all I have is a hammer. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks for telling me about her.
You are welcome.
Yes, that was lovely. Oh, and we had talked about in an episode that has not been released yet. We had talked about my. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. I think, it's interesting. My own laughter and chuckles. We had spoken about reparations and how I believe reparations are absolutely necessary. And there's an article by Ta-Nehisi Coates called The Case for Reparations, and it was published in The Atlantic recently, 2018 maybe, 2019, maybe earlier than that. But it's wonderful, and it's basically a history of all of the ways white people have systematically, economically oppressed people of color using unjust housing practices after, and just, so read the article. Everybody please read the article. It's much more articulate. Oh, shit! There, I just did it. See, I know that one, and then I almost did it. I was going to say it's much more articulate than I am, which is true, but yes. Much more knowledgeable, has a lot of data in it, which I appreciate. And if you look at the data and you look at maps put out by Housing Association saying no mortgages will be allowed in these areas that are colored in red because a lot of black people live there. I mean, it wasn't covert. It's not a conspiracy. It was policy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, everybody check that out. I'm going to read it.
Cool. Well, thanks for recording again. I'm sorry I messed up the first one.
No
that was a
worries.
fun moment. Did you like when I checked it and I just stared at it blankly? Like if I look at it long enough, I'll figure out that it actually did record. Yeah, I was definitely stuck. I recorded 47 seconds of us chit-chatting and then plugged in my headphones and it stopped recording. And then we.
But those were a hell of a 47 seconds.
They were maybe the best 47 seconds we've ever recorded. Too bad they'll never see the light of day. All right. Well, thank you for recording again.
Thank you, Teresa.
This has been It Chooses You. You can reach out to us for any reason at itchoosesyou.podcast@gmail.com. And we will be back shortly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyouPodcast@gmail.com.